Unlock the high returns of the expanding venture capital world right here on the Emerging Managers Podcast.
Welcome back to the Emerging Managers Podcast. I'm Scott Kelly, your host and the founder and CEO of Black Dog Venture Partners. And on today's episode, we have Doug Nissinoff, the founder and CEO of Intelligent Ventures. He's going to be discussing his background and the fund's investment thesis, which centers around the intersection of AI and healthcare. And I was really glad I got a chance to meet with Doug because we're fellow Tampa Bay citizens, and he's doing some great work in the University of South Florida in addition to his work at Intelligence. Dave's background is non-traditional, and he's a scientist by trade with a master's in biotech who worked in clinical research and later moved to New York to work in investor relations, consulting for publicly traded biotech and pharma companies. Now, Intelligent Ventures focuses on four main areas within AI-powered healthcare: biotech and pharma tools, excluding drugs, medical devices, diagnostics, and healthcare software as a service. The fund primarily invests in pre-seed and seed stage startups in the U.S. and Canada, writing checks between $50,000 and $25,000. So, Nissinoff emphasizes that proprietary data and training AI models on such data is the key factor for success in the healthcare AI space, making these companies prime acquisition targets. So listen into my interview and really understand how a scientist with an investor relations background is really working at the forefront of what's happening in healthcare and AI. And after this interview, I'll be back with my key takeaways. So give it a listen. We'll be back shortly. Hello, I'm Scott Kelly, the founder and CEO of Black Dog Venture Partners and your host for the Emerging Managers Podcast. And I'm excited to introduce Doug Nissinoff of Intelligent Ventures. Doug, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
So, Doug, before we get into Intelligent Ventures, talk to me a little bit about your background prior to launching the fund.
Oh, yeah. It's not normal by any means for emerging finance. So I'm actually a scientist by trade. Did my master's in biotech and worked in clinical research, did some neurology and psychiatry studies. And then, as a lot of people in academia say, I went to the dark side, finance. So moved to New York, worked in investor relations consulting. I worked with publicly traded biotech and pharma companies. It's a pretty fun job of a lot of Excel spreadsheets and pitch deck jockeying, but also making sure that Wall Street understands the stock price for a publicly traded biotech and pharma company. So translating complicated science into layman's terms. I eventually moved back to Florida in 2019, and I got my start with venture pretty randomly. One gentleman who I was just trying to meet and network as much as I could in the South Florida area for the life sciences. Wasn't very robust back then, and it's growing now. But one gentleman said, hey, look, let's meet up for drinks. And he told me that he licensed this technology. It was an MRI-compatible robot that does brain surgery. My jaw was on the floor after this conversation. I said, okay, I gotta ask, how can I help you? And he said, look, the consulting firm we worked for in New York wanted to charge me $18,000 a month for their services. Will you do it for equity? I was young, hungry, and said, let's go. Why not? And we worked together. The name of that company is called AIM Medical Robotics. And we actually raised $3 million for their seed round. Company's doing great. Fast forward, raised $8 million Series A, first in human studies up and coming. So one of the most successful startups I've ever been involved with was, and so the light bulb went off in my head and I said, well, people need help. I launched my own consulting firm, called it Renegade Bio Consulting. And through that, I've actually consulted for over 25 startups. Pre-seed through Series A was my sweet spot. I was never just a cap raise guy. That wasn't my thing. But as more so commercialization strategy, just getting off the ground and running. And I've actually kind of graduated to fractional executive work. I wore a chief business officer hat for a dental tech startup called Oral BioLife at one point. But I always did that part-time. It was kind of a fun side hustle. Like you, Scott, I like to stay busy too. But I then worked for a gene editing company. And unfortunately, that was one of those companies that was spun out of Stanford University. It was called Graphite Bio. Had all the sexy things that comes with a startup, right? It was the same scientific co-founder as CRISPR Therapeutics, which is now a multi-billion-dollar company. It was editing people's DNA for what they hoped to be a cure for sickle cell disease. And they did what a lot of people did back then, which is they went public with a preclinical drug, like a drug that's not even been in humans, in 2021, a year outperforming the company. I think you and I are now looking at this in retrospect, smiling and laughing, going, oh, maybe not the best move, but it was the very right move at the time if you want to raise capital quickly. First patient dosed had a serious adverse event. They're okay, but when Wall Street caught wind of that, that was it. Company went under. So I lost my job. Everyone lost it. And I did what any normal person would do, which is launch a venture capital.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk about Intelligent Venture. Share a bit about your thesis, where you're investing, how you're investing, check size, where you come into the marketplace.
Yeah, sure. So our thesis is the intersection of AI and healthcare. And we actually, this idea came when I was in a coffee shop back in December of 2022, before ChatGPT was a household name, before it hit 100 million. I actually was intrigued by AI for two reasons. Back when I worked in New York, one of my clients was a company called Schrodinger Inc., which is now a multi-billion-dollar company, using a combination of AI, computational physics, et cetera, to discover new drugs, new molecules. And I just thought it was the most incredible use of, back then, still kind of sort of nascent technology. Then I had a good buddy in grad school who worked for NVIDIA. And oftentimes we'd go out to get drinks and, a bunch of young guys in their early 20s, you're supposed to be talking about girls. We were talking about robots and how it could take over the world. That's what we were talking. And I asked him what the applications could be in healthcare, and my jaw was on the floor for what he had to say. And the last thing is I noticed that computational power doubled just about every year. It's called Moore's Law. Every 2 years, computational power doubles, which if you're looking for something that grows exponentially, hey, that's what we want to do with people's capital, right? Grow it exponentially. So here we are, AI-powered healthcare. We look at 4 buckets. It's biotech and pharma tools, no drugs just because we're a small fund, medical devices, diagnostics, and healthcare software as a service. We do 25 to 50K checks to pre-seed and seed stage startups that are the US and Canada.
And so talk to me about, where do you see the trends in AI and healthcare? Because obviously AI is now the buzzword. It's the vast majority of capital, being invested in venture. It's, OpenAI as the recording of this call is going to probably be a $1 trillion company within months. So talk to me how AI is really playing in, and what are some of the coolest things you're seeing? Maybe some of the wins that you're looking at right now.
Yeah. So to give you an update, we have 450 companies that have applied for funding in the past 2 years. Almost all of them meet the healthcare AI buzzwords. But what do we actually want? Well, we're looking for proprietary data, right? I think that anyone who's trying to come up with a new LLM that'll take on OpenAI or Anthropic or Gemini, I wouldn't bet on that. That's a madman.
Right, exactly.
But what I think might actually win the race in healthcare is proprietary data and training your AI models on such. You can become a prime acquisition target for just about whoever does win the AI race, Some of the cooler things we're seeing, we're seeing AI has always been good at, or has been good at imaging. So we're seeing a lot of people in radiology where it can identify broken bones, things like that. We've made 2 investments to date to give you an idea of what's exciting. The first is a company called Aged Diagnostics. It's a blood diagnostic test for liver disease. There's one specific disease called NASH, which stands for non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. Back in my New York days, I would read all these equity research reports from JP Morgan, from Morgan Stanley. And there was just this theme that whoever comes out with a drug to treat NASH will be a multi-billion-dollar company. That held true. So in 2024, Madrigal Pharmaceuticals came out with a drug for that, and it is now an $8 billion company with a B. But diagnosing NASH is still a problem. The only way to really do it, there's liver biopsy. So essentially cutting out a piece of your liver, like how many people are going to do that on a daily basis? Not many. Or imaging, which it's not that accurate. So this is just a blood test that looks at DNA methylation patterns is what they call it. And they then use AI to kind of make sense of that gibberish. And, there you go. It's a diagnostic test, right time, right place type of situation. They've had great data readouts to date. The founder is absolutely brilliant. But, as you can imagine, proprietary data is pretty clear as day with this one, right? Every new patient is a new data set. The other company we've invested in is a company called Heart.io. Think of it this way. When you have a EKG that's done it's a snapshot of your current cardiovascular state, predicts the future. But this is software that does something a little bit different. Essentially, it's predicted analytics for EKGs. So it can actually predict, hey, this person might have a higher risk for cardiovascular, heart attack, whatever it might be. And these guys, the proprietary data piece, I mean, I loved their answer. They're scrappy, they're in their late 20s, early 30s, couple guys. And I said, how are you getting your data? And they said, listen, we had partnerships with these healthcare systems. We were in there, like literally scouring filing cabinets and scanning EKGs and hardcore grit, So these are like some of the cool, so those are some of the things we've invested in. But stuff, the more Black Mirror type of stuff that you might be interested in, brain computer interfaces. So we saw one company where it's a helmet, and the helmet essentially reads electrical signals coming from the mind so that you can control a prosthetic with telepathy. So that was pretty cool to see the demo live. I'll stop there. There's just so many, and I could go for hours, but yeah.
No, I appreciate, I want to touch on that thing you mentioned about grit and founder. So obviously you've had 400 plus companies apply. Who are the makeup of the founders you're more intrigued by? Are they financial founders, ex-bankers? Are they AI, experts, or the medical field? What is the makeup of an ideal founder that you would invest in, based on those kind of criteria?
So it's actually not so much the professional background that as much as it is, there's a phenotype with personality.
Mm-hmm.
They're people who, they have a bone to pick. Mm-hmm. They're hungry. One of the founders, their first company failed and they're pissed. They want to show the world that they can do it. And you're going to chew through glass to make it happen. With Heart.io, the CEO, his grandfather passed away of heart disease. And he never got to meet his grandfather. And for him, it's a personal drive and mission.
Sure.
So it doesn't, I don't care if they're a banker or a scientist, but you can always listen to what Y Combinator has to say. Like they want one technical founder and one business person. But I also would make the argument that they're saying that the first unicorn that was started by a solo founder exists today because of AI. So I don't know if that holds true anymore.
Fair enough. So obviously AI has been a focus of how, what you invest in. How is AI playing about how you invest and how you do due diligence? Any new revelations there on your end?
Of course. Yeah. You have to drink the Kool-Aid, right? One of the things that we do actually, first when I get the data rooms, I manually scour. That's something that it's just, I don't think I'll ever lose that desire to replace it. But and there's nuggets you find, but we actually use ChatGPT. If you do upload all the documents in their data room to Google Holder, for example, you can then use ChatGPT to find the answers you're looking for. It'll use that folder as a data source for all your questions.
Okay.
So that makes diligence pretty cool, right? Like you can say, who else is in the cap table? And instead of sitting there going through 60, 70 files, it'll spit it out for you.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk to potential investors, LPs, family office and the like, because that's a large majority of our listeners. So, maybe talk about two things. One, the kind of the makeup of the current investors in the fund. And then, you did something really interesting on LinkedIn. You kind of went live, with your fundraising. So maybe pick one of those two and let's answer that question. Then we'll go to the next one.
Yeah, I guess let me tell you how we ended up finding our investors, because I think anyone who's trying to do a new fund, like you read all the books out there, it's antiquated. I read like 6 or 7 books on VC, and it's like reading a book on how to start Amazon.com, then being upset and you can't form Amazon yourself, right? You have to figure out your own niche, your own nuances. And the struggle that I ran into is I originally lived in Fort Lauderdale when we did this. And then my wife got a job in St. Augustine, thriving startup capital of nowhere. He lived off of a 2-lane country road. Chase Bank turned me away for starting a bank account because I was the first VC to ever walk in the door. I was screwed. So how do you find LPs? How do you find good startups? Yeah, I'm going to hit the road a lot. Don't get me wrong. But it also came down to being very creative on social media. So I turned to LinkedIn. And what happened was I was trying to find like family offices. I was trying to find sovereign wealth funds, university endowments, but we were too small. We were only targeting like 1 million. If we can oversubscribe it to 3 million, fantastic. And so everyone looked at us and said, you're too small. You're a first time fund manager. No, thank you. Why the hell are you in St. Augustine? Like, it's because of my wife. I told you, but what ended up happening, our very first LP that came, it caught me off guard. It was someone reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, hey, look, if you need any help with due diligence, let me know. And here's my resume. And I normally like click away from these messages, but I looked at the resume. And this gentleman was a Harvard-trained plastic surgeon who just graduated with his MBA out of MIT and said, and I looked at, and he was a plastic surgeon at Mass General. Yeah. And so I called him right away. I was like, I feel like I should be asking you for a job, man. How can I help you? We had a good talk, and the conversation was that he's so busy in the clinic, doesn't love being a plastic surgeon, but he's there. And wants to be involved in the latest and greatest in healthcare, but doesn't have the time, has the capital. I said, well, would you be interested in being an LP? And he said, absolutely. That was my very first investor.
That's awesome.
And the light bulb went off my head. I said, hey, here's my target LP base. It's clinicians, it's biopharma executives. And to fast forward, we have about 20 LPs in the fund. And it's been a really cool mix of what I just said, biopharma executives, we have lawyers, there's one guy, and actually a lot of people here in the Tampa Bay area that are just loving having a VC around. It's been cool. One gentleman I met up with him, you'll love this guy. I actually rode my bicycle to meet up with this guy for lunch in St. Petersburg and got an LP check. It was great. But met up with him, and he was an IT consultant who he did very well with that. But what I noticed when I met up with him, he was wearing the Oura Ring. He had the Apple Watch on, and he had like all these gadgets. He's an enthusiast for sure, Sure. And he ended up investing in the fund as well. And so you can see that's kind of how we figured out our base was like who actually resonates with AI healthcare.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So let's talk to potential listeners that are potential LPs for the fund. I like to ask this question to all of our folks that we interview. Why your fund and why now?
Yeah, sure. We have this unfair advantage when it comes to deal flow. My LinkedIn inbox, honestly, Scott, I'm thinking of hiring an intern just to go through it. We've done very well with this viral marketing that's gone on LinkedIn. We've grown to like 17,000 followers. But I've also met 360 investors in the past 2 years, whether they be VCs, angels, family offices, not necessarily asking them to be LPs, but let's work together and build a career. Every morning I wake up and there's at least 3 to 4 deals coming across my desk from other investors. And those are the best referrals every time. It's like, you can go on Netflix and have the AI algorithm recommend a show for you. Or you can have a drinking buddy of 30 years recommend a show to you. Who's going to do a better job? So it's the same concepts. So we have a lot of great deal flow coming in. We've built our name out there, and we've even, a lot of the bigger names and the bigger institutions are starting to partner with us informally. Okay. Mm-hmm. They're saying, hey, what else are you seeing? We spun this out of here. Would you like to take a first look? And these relationships that we're building, it's just become so close that we're getting offers to come in for deals that should be closed. But because we're also small, we can fit in.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Any final thoughts that you want to share? You've given some great insight to other managers that are going to be listening to this podcast and also investors. Any final thoughts or advice or your thoughts about the future that you want to share?
Yeah. We're right now being a part of the future of healthcare. And my team and I are just excited. We get off the calls with one another every Monday we meet, and we're just thrilled. I think that healthcare here in the US and globally is fragmented, broken, leaves much to be desired. But I think that despite being one of the systems that's usually very slow to adapt to new technology, it's not necessarily the case for AI. Every large institution's scrambling. If you look, you'll see some big names out there who are hiring a chief AI officer or whatever. They're scrambling, man. And it's only a matter of time before they start scooping up a lot of the companies that are in our pipeline, trying to integrate it into their healthcare system. So the future of healthcare is now. We have a front row seat. Anyone who wants to join us, I welcome.
Fantastic. Well, how can people learn more? How can they learn more about Intelligent Ventures and how they get in contact with you?
Absolutely. So the best way to learn about us is just go on our website. It's intelligencevc.com. You can learn everything about our thesis. You can look into our portfolio companies, and it even has a list. We do everything on AngelList. So anyone who still wants to come in as an LP while we're wrapping up our close, we still have a few LP.
Okay.
But anyone who wants to reach out to me directly, my email address is doug@intelligencevc.com. Or just add me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. For all listening today, I encourage you to like, follow, comment, and share this podcast. And Doug, thank you for being on the show today. And I wish you the best of luck solving all things healthcare.
Thanks, Scott.
Welcome back. My conversation with Doug and Intelligent Investors, we got to spend some time talking about what he and I both understand is a highly fragmented industry that's healthcare, but slow to adapt with large institutions. And they're now scrambling to integrate AI, which suggests future acquisitions of companies in the fund's pipeline. And so what Doug is searching for is seeking startups with the proprietary data and the AI models trained on that data, as this is seen as the winning factor in healthcare AI. And he wants founders that possess a strong phenotype with personality, a personal drive, or a bone to pick, such as wanting to overcome a past failure or being motivated by a personal mission. And I think that's really important when you're backing early stage founders, especially in healthcare. During the conversation, we talked about how he's investing in companies using AI. I asked him how he's using AI in his analysis, and he was open to share some tools. He's using tools like Google Folder to integrate with large models like ChatGPT to quickly search and find answers within the company's data room during the due diligence. And so it's really intriguing to find out that although Doug and his team are still hands-on, personally doing due diligence, he's even using AI as a tool to find the data he needs to make intelligent investment decisions. So, I encourage you to listen to what Doug and I talked about healthcare and what's happening in AI in healthcare and some of the amazing things that he's involved in. And then I encourage you to like, follow, comment, and share this post, and come back and find us again on the Emerging Managers Podcast. And I'll see you next time.
Join Scott Kelly, Tracy Hazard, and their high-performing capital fund manager guests next week on the Emerging Managers Podcast. Don't miss our upcoming virtual and live VC Fast Pitch and podcast events. For more details, background on our guests, or an application to be our next guest, visit emergingmanagerspodcast.com. Don't miss out on shaping the future of venture capital and entrepreneurship with us by joining our robust community of innovators and investors today.